1956. A California paper featured 3 Manhattan high-rises with lighted 150-foot high crosses emblazoned on them. Now, I don't have any idea if that actually happened in New York in the sense of appearing in newspapers here. California thought it was a big deal that you would have 3 crosses down in Manhattan. But the truth of the matter is, crosses are everywhere. If you're paying any attention at all, there are 4 up here, very, very visible on stage. I see them every day. I go to the gym. They're tattooed on the biceps and the leg muscles of the guys and gals that are working out in there. They're everywhere, right? In 2023, the most recent figure I could find, almost 4,000 searches were done on the internet for cross jewelry. I mean, they're common. They're fashion. Earrings, necklaces, all of that kind of thing. Crosses are everywhere, except in Luke. Luke only uses the word cross 3 times. Now, he refers to the death of Jesus more often than that, but the actual word only occurs 3 times. You may have heard it recently. It's only been a month ago yesterday that we celebrated Good Friday, and we probably talked about the cross. That would be highly unusual for us not to on a Good Friday service. We might even have read the text where at the crucifixion scene, they take the cross and place it on the shoulders of Simon of Cyrene. And the text says, so that he could carry it behind Jesus. There's that word again. Behind him. Now, we know one of the places that occurs, right? Our text. Chapter 9, verse 23. If anyone would come after me, come behind me, let him take up his cross and follow me. Interesting, in that particular text, the word is take up, pick up the cross. The second time that Jesus talks about the cross is over in chapter 14, verse 27. And it's talking about whether or not you really want to be a disciple. If you want to be a disciple, he says, you will bear my cross, your cross, technically. So, you see the intensification? You take it up, and as discipleship becomes a bigger deal for you, you bear it. You feel the weight of it. It is exactly what it sounds like. You are bearing a weight. But by the time you get to chapter 23, Simon becomes a metaphor for what it means to be a cross-shaped disciple. He is asked not just to take it up, not just to bear it, he's asked to carry it, to move from one place to another with it, as if it becomes a permanent part of who he is. Now, I don't know whether he wanted to do that or not. He was on his way to town. The text is pretty clear. He was journeying into Jerusalem. We don't even know why he's going into Jerusalem, but he gets elicited to carry Jesus' cross. I'm going to assume that it made an impact on his life. I don't have any idea. Now, let me remind you, if you were here this morning, what we said was, if you're going to be a cross-bearing disciple, you're going to have to listen to Jesus. That's the whole transfiguration story, is that Jesus shows up on a mountain with Moses and Elijah, the law and the prophets, and the final words are, this is my son, listen to him. Cross-shaped disciples listen to Jesus. And in Luke, listening implies obeying. Not just hearing words, but perceiving, thinking, being motivated by, and finally doing what it is that Jesus asks you to do. So, my question, as I was thinking about this particular conference and thinking about this particular text, I really began to wonder what can we do in the context of Luke chapter 9, which is where this text occurs, that might help us answer the question, what does it mean to both listen and follow Jesus? And so I just thought I would invite you to take your Bibles. I did discover, this is how observant I was first service, there are Bibles in those seats. And the text is on page 70, the second page 70, because they start over in the New Testament, I guess. I didn't look to see for sure. But I just want to walk through the paragraphs. And you'll notice the labels. For whatever reason, the Bible producers, the publishers, have chosen to label sections in our Bibles. You do know this already, but I'm going to remind you anyway. Those are not part of the text, and sometimes they are not very helpful. But I figure if a publisher can label the text, so can I. And it won't be any more helpful or less helpful than theirs, and it will not be any more inspired than theirs. It will just be my label over this text. But I come to the text that follows the story of the Transfiguration, and it really is an interesting story. It's about, are you ready? Faithless disciples. Does that sound like a contradiction of terms to you? Faithless disciples. Listen to the text, starting in verse 37. The next day, when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met him, and then a man from the crowd cried out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, because he's my only child. Often a spirit seizes him. Suddenly he shrieks, and it throws him into convulsions until he foams at the mouth, wounding him. It nearly ever leaves him." Hardly ever leaves him. I begged your disciples to drive it out. Here's the line. Does it get your attention? But they could not. Yes, they could. You remember where we started this morning? Chapter 9, verse 1. He gave them power to cast out demons. Chapter 9, verse 6. What did they do? They went out and they cast out demons and they healed. Of course they had the power to do it, but not today. So it begs the question, doesn't it? What happened? Why couldn't they cast him out? And I think Jesus has this penetrating response. "You unbelieving and rebellious generation, how long will I be with you and put up with you? Bring him to me." And as the boy was still approaching, the demon knocked him down and threw him into severe convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, cured the boy, and gave him back to his father. And they were all astonished at the greatness of God, or some translations at the majesty of God. These disciples who should have been able to cast out this demon could not do it. And his response to that is, "You are a faithless generation." Don't you get it yet? How long do I have to put up with you? You see, there's a kind of expectation in the life and teachings of Jesus that those of us who follow him will actually finally figure it out. And that we will learn to begin to trust. And that we will believe when he says, "You have the power to do this." You can thrive as a Christian. You can make it as a Christian. You can do the things that I'm asking you to do. What I'm asking you to do is not impossible. Just believe me when I tell you that this is true. And so I ponder myself, just wonder, what in the world? What do I have to do? And I think about the fact that his statement, his closing line that Luke uses in this paragraph is that they were astonished. Astonished at God. When was the last time you were astonished at God? I know you have been. I know there have been moments in your life that you sat back and you thought, "Oh, only God." When was it? When you saw sunrise? I mean, for some reason, that particular morning, I mean, it happens every day. But for some reason, that particular day, the sun came peeking up over the buildings or the trees, and you just stood there and thought, oh, man, God knows how to paint. Maybe it was when your son and your daughter managed to get their marriage back together and the divorce didn't happen. And you think, oh, man, oh my God. Maybe it was that moment when you looked in the mirror. Oh, by the way, this is my story. You don't have to have this one. This one belongs to me. I get up every single day and I look in the mirror and I am astonished. Let me finish. I have a t-shirt that I should have worn. On it, it says, genuine recycled parts. On the back, it says, taking father like daughter literally. I'm alive today because our youngest daughter donated her stem cells and it cured my cancer. Every day. I'm astonished at God. Why would I ever question what God asks me to do or to believe about Jesus when I know what God has already done? And if you don't have one of those moments, get one. By the way, you do have it. It's called the resurrection. And it's called the resurrection in your life. When you became a believer, God did the most miraculous thing possible. I just think sometimes we forget. And I think maybe one of the best things we could do is just remember that we ought to be astonished and stop taking God for granted. Because you see, I think the real label that goes over that section, if we think about it, is that cross-shaped disciples treasure the majesty of God. They hang on to it, they cherish it, they clutch the majesty of God lest they in any way be tempted to forget what God has done and what they've seen from Him. And of course, as soon as that story is done and they've seen this majestic act of God, He turns right around and disappoints them once again. And what you end up with is what I would call these timid disciples. These timid disciples. Everyone, it says in the text, was amazed at all the things that He was doing. He told the disciples, let these words sink in. The Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men. But they didn't understand this statement. It was concealed from them so that they could not grasp it. And they were afraid to ask Him about it. They've spent months and months and months following Him around, listening to Him teach, watching Him raise the dead, watching Him feed people, watching Him talk. He actually, in the book of Luke, not too far before this story, woke up from a nap on a stormy sea and said, peace, be still, and the wind and the waves stopped. And they said, what kind of a man can do this? And the answer is God. Only God. And yet they're afraid to ask. Now, the text is weird. Forgive me. The text is just weird. And I'm not going to explain it because I don't understand it. But the weirdness of the text is they could not understand it. Did you notice that? They could not understand it. They didn't understand it. It was concealed and they could not grasp it. I don't know. Is God testing them? Is it? And I think there's merit to this. They have yet to see the resurrection. So maybe they just have not yet kind of wrapped their brain around what Jesus really is capable of doing. And they certainly don't understand it at this point. But I think what comes out of it, at least what I would like for you to come out of that with, is this: ask. Ask. Scott and I have the opportunity to have breakfast with some guys every Thursday. It's half a dozen guys from the church that we meet with, and lots of times it's just listening to Audie tell really corny jokes. Some of the guys are, it's just what you would expect a bunch of guys in a coffee clutch. Boy, I hate when my wife calls it that. Sometimes it's serious. Sometimes it's about Mike's adult addicted son and the difficulties that he's going through and prayers that we're on. But sometimes it sounds a lot like this: Scott, can you explain this to me about the text? Can you answer this question? And I love that inquisitive mind. I will confess that I get a little annoyed sometimes at some of the questions, not that those guys ask, but there are people who have my cell phone number. I do think that's a legitimate thing to let people have. And every once in a while my phone dings, and I won't tell you who it is, but my family will know. Can you tell me about yada, 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 yada text? And give me an answer to give to my friend. And sometimes it's like, you're right in the middle of what I'm doing, and I don't know if I want to answer this question right this minute. But that's the beauty. She doesn't know when I read it, so I can answer it at my leisure. But I love the fact that she asks the question. She wants to understand, because I think this is true. The cross-shaped disciples are inquisitive. They want to know. They want to understand. They are digging in, trying to comprehend, and they're using their imaginations about what that looks. They don't have to wait for Sunday morning for a preacher or a Tuesday night for a small group leader to tell them what the application of the text is. They're able to read the text, look at it, understand it, and say, I think this is how that works. Well, at least the writer of Hebrews thought that when he said, isn't it about time that some of you were already teachers and you still happen to be taught elementary things? He thought they should figure it out too. Well, right after that, this is going to give you a little clue into the level of maturity of the disciples at this point. Don't be too judgmental of them, but man, these are ambitious disciples. Do you see Jesus says, I'm going to go and suffer. And they say, who's the greatest? Come on! Verse 46, an argument started among them about who would be the greatest of them. But Jesus, knowing the thoughts of their hearts, took a little child and had him stand next to him, and he told them, whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes him who sent me. For whoever is least among you, this one is great. You know, we live in a world that is all about power and position. It's all about who's in control. I remember as a younger person, and that has been quite some time ago, I remember the Emmys. That's what I remember. I remember the Emmys. Now, I have to think about the Emmys and the Oscars and the ESPYs, and we have multiplied awards for people to the place that if you don't win one award, you can win one somewhere, and if you don't like that, you can just vote yourself one, because you can self-publish your own award. I mean, they're everywhere, and we're voting for them for. I'm surprised we don't have a Christian music association. Oh, wait a minute, we do. People singing for Jesus get awards. So let's just start us up a little preaching contest and see who's the best. Oh, no, wait a minute, we have that also. Well, what do you think? If you're thinking about that child, make sure you think about it right. Because when he called that little child, he didn't call him up there because little children are flexible and teachable and sweet. He called a child because in the first century, children were absolutely powerless. In a Roman world, the Romans determined which children lived and which ones didn't. They had no power whatsoever. And so when Jesus says, you bring a little child up here and stand him next to me, now you take a look at this little child, because this is what a great person is like. A great person has no power. Remember what Jesus said about his own mission here on earth? I did not come to be served, but to serve and give my life a ransom for many. Now, Jesus came as king. That's his ultimate destiny. But he came in a stable. And the first people to see him were lowly shepherds. And that was his life. Not greatness, not power, service and ransom, sacrifice. You remember what the Apostle Paul said in Philippians chapter 2? After the great Christ hymn, which, by the way, starts out, the one who was fully God did not think equality with God something to be held on to, but poured himself out and became human, including becoming a slave. And Paul turns right around, right after that, and he says, I am completely content to be a drink offering poured out on your sacrifice. You know what a drink offering is? This is a drink offering, by the way. For me. The whole cancer thing was a pain in its consequences, like drinking water when I preach. This is a drink offering. I'm not going to do this, but I'll put the lid back on. This is a drink offering. The priest is in the temple. And you come in with your sacrifice, a goat, a lamb. If you're poor, a couple of pigeons. And the priest walks up with a glass of wine and he pours it out over the top. Oops, he's leaking. He pours it out over the top of that sacrifice. And it just has incense before God. You just sang about it. Incense before you. And Paul says, I'm perfectly content to be a drink offering. I don't have to be a sacrifice. I don't have to be the big deal. I don't have to be a lamb. I don't have to bring a goat. I'm happy to just pour myself on your offering so that your offering is enhanced before God. Now, this question stares me in the face right this very moment. Would I be content running the sound system, or do I need to be up here with my mouth? Would I be content turning on the lights, unlocking the door, if nobody said anything and nobody thanked me and I didn't get any awards for it? I didn't get a title like Deacon of Doors. Can you serve? Can you follow Jesus without recognition? I had a good friend, a former student, missionary recruiter, contact me the other day. He was hesitant to do it. I'm sorry that he felt he should be hesitant to ask me. He was hesitant to ask me if I would help him try to raise some funds because he was falling behind. I felt compelled to try to help. And so Gail and I gave him a gift. And he was very, very gracious and immediately responded with a thank you. And I appreciate that. I do. I think that's good manners. It's appropriate. And here's my question. If he didn't say thank you, would I give it to him again? Did I give it to him because I wanted a thank you note, a tax deduction, or because I thought that God wanted me to give it to him? The latter. And whether he says thank you or not is immaterial to the giving of the gift. Because we're not in it for what we get. It has nothing to do with that. Now, some of you are tasked with public things. Has this band not been exceptional? I mean, have you not had great music? Aren't you glad that there are people who have public gifts? Can I ask you to do a favor to them? Pray for them that they never let their public gifts become arrogant or self-serving, but that it always and only points to Jesus. Because you see, cross-shaped disciples always serve without feeling slighted. And that's the key. Well, the story goes on. Let me hasten down a little further. This is fascinating. There are two stories right back to back. The first one starts in verse 49. John responded, Master, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop them because they don't follow us. Remember now, how did this chapter start? You have the power to cast out demons. Oh, by the way, they could not. And now they're looking down the street and they're seeing somebody casting out demons, and they say, hey, they're not one of us. They're not following us. They don't look the way we do it. And Jesus says, we'll stop them. Now, he said, whoever is not against you is for you. Good. Very next story. He sends them out to preach. They go to the Samaritan village. The Samaritans don't listen to him. And what did James and John, the sons of thunder, want to do? Can we call down fire from heaven? No, I don't think so. It's not the way we do things. But it is. Because you see, I think what I see in this text is that we have some intolerant disciples. That's how I would label them. They don't do it our way. They don't do it the way we do it. They don't take care of things the way that we take care. You know I'm a preacher, right? You know I want my church, I'm retired from church officially, but you know I want my church to grow, right? You know that Gail and I have had hundreds of conversations probably at this point about the fact that since our retirement we look around and we realize we have so many young families that we don't even know. We're just so excited about the fact. And I have preachers ask me, well, what do you think about the fact that your church is growing? What should I think? You want me to be unhappy that Jesus is being preached and people are coming to faith and we have babies being born? We had parent dedication for 23 babies this year, and that wasn't all of them. You want me to be unhappy? Some preachers act like I'm supposed to be disappointed that because I'm not the preacher, the church is doing well. God forbid. I've had preachers come to me and cry in my office because somebody planted another church down in their community, and that church is growing and their church is not, and they're crying, and I'm thinking, would you not stop and just say, are they preaching Jesus? Because if they're preaching Jesus, you ought to be happy that people are coming to faith, and you ought to do a second thing. You ought to figure out why they're not coming to faith at your church. Because if they're coming to faith at that church down there, then they need faith. You know what Paul said to the Philippian church when he heard about preachers who were preaching and saying things ambitiously, like they were trying to build their own little community? He said, I don't care as long as Christ is preached. What do you care about whether that church down the street is getting members that you're not if they're preaching Jesus? This collection of churches finds itself inside a large collection of churches. It's been known for generations that we're all a part, and this is where I belong. This is my family. We're part of the Restoration heritage. We're part of Christian Church, Church of Christ tradition. Did you ever hear the slogan? We're not the only Christians, just Christians only. But we don't act like it. One of the first things that I had to be taught when I was invited to teach in Eastern Europe is you have to ignore the name on the door. They don't mean a thing. Doesn't matter which column, as long as they're preaching Jesus. As long as people are coming to faith in Jesus, be happy, rejoice, because cross-shaped disciples welcome everybody's contribution to the kingdom. One of the things I love about Madison Park, which is where Scott and I get to serve, is we partner with anybody that will partner with us to proclaim the gospel. If we can help somebody else feed the children in our school system, we're going to help them do that in the name of Jesus. If we can help provide housing for people in the name of Jesus, we will do it. We can't afford to do it all, but we can let our pride get out of the way and say, let us partner with you. And so Scott serves on a large social services committee. If you were in his workshop, you heard this, where there's 14 or 16 churches of various kinds that all come together to make a difference and meet needs, human need in our community in the name of Jesus. Why would we not do that? Other than just being intolerant. Last paragraph. I would call it reticent. I don't have a better name for it. As they're traveling, verse 57, someone said, I'll follow you wherever you go. Any of you ever said that? I'm not going to ask. Don't raise their hands. Foxes have holes and birds have nests. Now, why did he say that? Because I got to go do something. You heard, I'll follow you. Jesus said foxes don't have any holes and birds don't, the sky don't have any nests, and the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And he said to another, follow me. And they said, Lord, first let me go bury my father. And then he said, let the dead bury their dead. And then they said, I'll follow you, but let me go home and say goodbye to those in my house. And he says, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. Those are legitimate excuses, folks. Don't be too harsh. Those are real things. Some of you have had to do that. You've had to go take care of your parents. You've had situations that you felt kind of hemmed you in and contained you. But none of them should stop you from following Jesus. Those excuses can be good excuses until they get in the way of your discipleship. Until they stop you from actually following the King of Kings. Until they keep you from being the person that God calls you to be. I had the privilege of doing a phone interview with one of our kids from our church. He's at Ozark Christian College. And he said, I need to talk to somebody who's been a Christian a long time. Would you let me interview you? And I said, what you're really saying is you need somebody old. I qualify. No, he said, I need somebody that's followed Jesus a long time. And I said, well, I qualify for that too. And so I'm talking to this, 18-year-old kid. Comes from a pretty tough situation. He's a great, great kid. He's down at a Christian college. He's got an assignment for a class, it says, ask somebody who's been a Christian for a long time how they stayed the course. How did they stick it out? Let me do it this way, anecdotally for you. When I found out I had cancer, Gail and I had to go and meet with a social worker at Simon Advanced Learning Center for whatever they call that place. And we had to meet with a social worker because I was being considered for a trial to test out some new drugs. And in the course of this interview, she said, "So, what are your coping mechanisms?" I looked at Gail and I sat there and I thought, coping mechanisms. And pretty soon I said, "Are you asking me if I take drugs? If I soothe my anxieties with alcohol? If you're asking me, let me just say it this way. Gail and I, at this point, have been married over 50 years, and we've had lots of kind of rough road during that 50 years, and not once has God ever let us down. And He's not going to let us down now. And if I come out the other side of this cancer and I'm still alive, that's great, and I'm going to give God honor. And if I don't, I'm still going to give God honor, and I expect my family to do the same. This isn't a matter of if I die, that's a God's failure. God is going to be faithful no matter what, because that's who God is. And cross-shaped disciples don't turn back. They just don't. They've got grit and resilience, and they fight to be faithful. And that's what Jesus is looking for. He's not just looking for you to take up your cross. He's looking for you to bear it and to carry it. And I bet you can. I'm pretty sure you can. Because I know the God that you serve. And He will not let you down as long as you keep your hand